They didn't knock like family. They rang the bell like salesmen, sharp, impersonal, impatient. I was still drying my hands when I opened the door, expecting maybe a neighbor or the postman. Instead, there they stood. My son, Martin, in his crisp blazer. My daughter, Gina, holding her phone like a shield. And a stranger with a leather folder in his arms. "Mom," Martin said, already stepping past me. "We've got something important to discuss." No hug. No, "How are you?" No flowers, no pie, no memory of who I was before I became just an obstacle in their day. They walked into my living room like it was a boardroom. Sat down like they owned the chairs. The man, tall, polite, forgettable, placed his folder on my coffee table and gave me a rehearsed smile. "I'm Mr. Caro, your children's legal representative." Legal. I stood frozen in the doorway, the dish towel still in my hand. There was a half-made cup of tea on the stove. I had been planning to read after lunch. Nothing grand. Just a quiet day in the house I'd lived in for 41 years. I sat, slowly. My knees complained. They always do when weather changes. "Before we begin," Gina said, smoothing her skirt, "please know this is for your benefit. We're only trying to make sure you're safe." "Safe from what?" Martin opened the folder, a stack of papers, clipped and highlighted, full of lines I couldn't read from across the room. "It's a transfer," he said. "If you sign, the house goes into a family trust, for management, for simplification." Gina nodded. "You've been saying how hard it is to keep up with things here. The lawn, the plumbing, all the rooms." I stared at her. I had said no such thing. I'd mentioned once that the upstairs window stuck. That was it. "With the trust," Mr. Caro chimed in, "your children can legally manage the property, make decisions on your behalf. You'll still live here, of course. Nothing changes." Everything changes. I reached for the folder. My hands were steady. I flipped to the first page. Read the title, Durable Family Property Agreement. Below that, my name, typed in bold. Then Martin and Gina's names. I turned the page. More legalese. Lines for signatures. Paragraphs about authority, transfer of title, maintenance rights. I couldn't understand it all, but I understood enough. "This isn't for my benefit," I said softly. They didn't respond. "You didn't call, you didn't visit, and now you come here with a lawyer." "Mom," Martin said, voice tightening, "let's not turn this into drama. We've discussed this. You've said how you feel overwhelmed. This makes things easier." "I never said that," I replied. The room felt colder than it had 10 minutes ago. The clock above the fireplace ticked loudly, like it was keeping time for someone else. Mr. Caro slid a pen across the table. "You can take time to read it carefully, Mrs. Hemsley. There's no rush." Gina leaned forward. "We thought today would be a good day. You're home. Everything's quiet. We cleared our schedules." How generous of them. I looked at their faces. My children, my blood. Raised with packed lunches and ironed clothes. Tucked into bed with stories. Backed through college, apartments, divorces, mistakes. They hadn't sat in this room in over a year. They used to say, "We'll come visit, Mom. Someday." I didn't think someday would include paperwork and a lawyer. "You said nothing changes," I said again. "Exactly," Martin replied. I closed the folder, set it gently back on the table. "Then why are you pushing so hard to make it happen?" No one spoke. The lawyer shifted slightly. Gina looked at Martin. Martin looked at the clock. I stood up. "Tea's gone cold," I said. "Mom, be reasonable. Gina said quickly. I turned to her. Was I unreasonable when I co-signed your mortgage? That's not fair. Or when I wired you $10,000 after your divorce? Or when I paid for Lily's therapy sessions because your insurance didn't cover it? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Martin stood. We're just trying to make a plan to protect your future. My future doesn't need a signature to be protected, I said. It needs respect. I walked to the kitchen without another word. Let the silence sit with them. The tea bag in the mug was limp. I tossed it out, reboiled the water. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, from memory, the kind that presses on your ribs. They didn't leave right away. I heard whispers, a chair scraping, the folder being zipped closed. I poured myself fresh tea and stood by the window. The yard looked the same, maple leaves half turned, fence leaning just a little, old swing swaying with the breeze. Behind me, the front door opened. We'll call you, Martin said. You always say that, I replied, not turning around. And then they were gone. I didn't touch the folder again that day, just left it on the table, unopened. It sat there like something damp and rotting, quiet, but present. By evening, the house had gone still again. No voices, no footsteps. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of wood settling in its old frame. I made a small dinner: boiled egg, toast, a bit of cheese. I ate slowly, chewing more than I needed to. Then I rinsed the dishes, dried them, placed them in their place like I'd done for decades. I lived by quiet routines, not because I was slow or forgetful, but because they anchored me. Because this house, for all its drafts and chipped corners, was mine. Mine to keep. Mine to lose. The next morning, I woke before 6. My legs ached. They always did when rain was coming. But I dressed and made coffee. The folder was still on the table, waiting. I sat down and opened it again. This time I read every line. It wasn't just a trust. It was control. Paragraph after paragraph, I saw what they hadn't said aloud. The house would be in their names. Decisions about repairs, sales, even renters, theirs to make. I could live here, but only as long as mutual conditions remained favorable, whatever that meant. They hadn't asked me to sign over management. They'd asked me to surrender. I closed the folder again. For good this time. And then I walked to the secretary desk by the window, the one with the old brass key I'd kept since Gerald gave it to me the year after we bought the house. Inside were my documents, neatly labeled folders, tax returns, property deeds, letters, receipts. Everything I'd kept, everything I'd paid, everything I'd built. I pulled out the folder marked Gina plus Martin. It was thick. There was the $12,000 check I'd sent Gina when she got that grant writing job and needed a reliable car. A bank statement showing the transfer to Martin's failed landscaping business. Bills from the rehab center when Gina's ex spiraled. Receipts for holidays I paid for because things were tight this year. Page after page of quiet, steady giving. And now, they wanted the house. No conversation. No mom. Can we talk? Just a lawyer and a stack of papers. I thought of their faces when I refused the tea, when I asked why they were pushing. Martin had looked like a man stuck in traffic. Gina had blinked hard, like I'd disappointed her. I wasn't being reasonable. That word, they both used it, reasonable, as if I'd slipped out of my lane, forgotten my role, as if I was a guest overstaying in my own life. By noon, I was tired. Not from reading, but from remembering. So much had been poured into them. and they'd come to collect what they believed was rightfully theirs. I took my keys and walked out to the porch. The air was crisp. Yellow leaves skittered down the sidewalk. A young couple jogged past with a stroller, laughing. I wondered if Gina ever laughed like that anymore, if Martin still knew how. Back inside, I brewed a fresh pot of tea, sat at the table, and stared at the envelope the lawyer had left behind, for signature, in bold, as if I owed them a response. The phone rang mid-afternoon. I didn't answer it. A minute later, a text. "Hey, Mom. Just checking in. Hope you're okay. If you have any questions about the documents, let us know. No pressure. Just want what's best for you." No pressure. But they brought a lawyer. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my drawer and took out the business card of someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Diane Lockwood, family lawyer. She'd helped Gerald and me set up our wills before he passed. No-nonsense woman, sharp as a nail. I dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring. "Diane Lockwood." "Diane, it's Lorraine Hemsley." A pause. Then warmth. "Lorraine, I haven't heard that name in too long. How are you?" "I'm fine," I said. "But I need a bit of legal advice. It's family-related." "Of course. Want to come in this week?" "I'd rather not wait," I said. "Tomorrow, if possible." Another pause. "Tomorrow morning, 9. Bring whatever you've got." "I will." We hung up. I set the phone down gently, like it had just delivered something sacred. The decision wasn't made in anger. It was made in quiet, in the stillness after they left, in the hush of realizing that my life wasn't theirs to divide. By evening, I made myself a bowl of soup. I turned on the radio, jazz soft and humming, and sat by the window. I didn't feel sad. I felt clear. I didn't sleep much that night, but not because of worry. I've had worse nights. After Gerald's first heart attack, after Martin's layoff, after Gina called crying in the middle of the night from some motel off Highway 10. This night was different. My mind wasn't spiraling. It was sorting. I got up at 6, showered, wore the navy blouse Gerald always liked, the one with the quiet buttons. I packed the documents in a folder. Everything they'd asked me to sign, plus everything they'd forgotten I still had. By 8:40, I was on my way to Diane's office. The town hadn't changed much in the last decade. A few new stores, a new bank. But Main Street still had the same bakery where I used to buy Martin's birthday cakes. The same park where Gina used to sulk when she didn't get her way. Memory was everywhere. And yet, it didn't hurt today. It just sat there, like an old coat on a hook. Diane's office was on the second floor of an old brick building above the pharmacy. She hadn't changed. Short hair, sharp suit, glasses that meant business. "Lorraine," she said, standing to hug me. "Still carrying the whole family on your back?" "Not anymore," I said. "That's why I'm here." She raised an eyebrow. "Sit down. Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the visit, the lawyer, the documents, the language they used, safety, simplification, reasonable. I told her how long it had been since they'd visited, how they only showed up when something was needed. Money, mostly. Diane listened without interrupting, tapping her pen slowly on her legal pad. When I finished, she looked at me for a long time. "Do you want to give them the house?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not like that." "Then don't." She pushed the documents aside. "You're under no obligation. Emotionally, maybe, but not legally." "What if they push back?" "Then let them. You're not senile. You're not sick. You're not incompetent. You're a woman with full capacity and a long memory." I smiled at that. "What do you want to do?" I didn't hesitate. I want to make sure they can't touch it, not unless I say so. Diane nodded. Then we'll do a living trust. In your name. You stay the trustee. You stay the owner. If you want to give them access someday, you can, but only if and when you choose to. And if I want to change my will, we'll do that too. You have full rights. You always have. We spent the next hour going through papers. She made copies, took notes, asked questions I didn't expect, like who actually calls just to say hello, who shows up without asking for anything. I answered honestly. Only one name came to mind. Eva, Gina's daughter, my granddaughter, 23. She lived 2 towns over, worked part-time at the clinic. She came by once a month with muffins. Not because she had to. Just because. Diane made a note. When we were done, she handed me a folder. I'll draw up the paperwork. You'll have it by Monday. I stood to go, and she looked at me the way a friend does after a long silence. Lorraine, you know this isn't just about documents, right? I know. You're reclaiming something. Yes, I said. Me? I walked back to the car slowly, letting the sun warm my face. Something had shifted. Not in the world, but in me. At home, I brewed tea. The house smelled like paper and lemon soap. I walked through each room, touched the door frames, ran my hand along the hallway wall where the wallpaper had bubbled. This was my house, not a burden, not a shell, not a placeholder until someone smarter took over. Mine. When I reached the living room, the envelope from Martin and Gina was still on the coffee table. I picked it up and carried it to the fireplace. I didn't burn it. Not yet. But I opened it, took out the papers, tore them once down the middle, then again, and again, until they were nothing but soft white flakes in my wastebasket. Then I sat down and wrote a letter. I didn't write to them. I wrote to myself. The letter wasn't long, but it said everything I hadn't allowed myself to say out loud. It began with a simple line. You are not a mistake just because they treat you like one. I wrote about the night Martin had pneumonia at 7, and I stayed awake rubbing his back with eucalyptus until morning. About Gina's first heartbreak when she cried in the bathtub, and I sat on the floor reading her old storybooks just to distract her. About all the times I skipped haircuts, new clothes, even heating in rough winters, because one of them needed something. I wrote it all, not to be pitied, to remember who I had been, who I still was. After I finished, I folded the letter and slid it into the drawer with the others. Letters to Gerald. Notes to myself. Pieces of a woman no one bothered to ask about anymore. The next 2 days passed quietly. I kept busy. Cleaned the pantry. Repaired the garden fence. Took a walk down the old trail near the library. I didn't check my phone. Let their silence pile up in missed calls and unread messages. On the 3rd day, Gina showed up again. No warning. No knock. Just her car in the driveway and the sound of the screen door opening before I even stood from the kitchen table. Mom, she called. Are you home? I walked into the living room. She stood there in heels, jacket still buttoned, face too bright for the time of day. I thought I'd check on you, since we didn't hear back. You could have called? I did, several times. You mean you sent a few messages between meetings? Her smile faltered. Okay, she said. Fair. I didn't invite her to sit. I didn't offer tea. She stood awkwardly by the armchair, looking around like she expected the place to have changed in 3 days. We just want what's best, Mom. That's not what this is about. It is. You've always said you didn't want to be a burden. I took a breath. A burden to whom, Gina? You haven't changed a light bulb in this house in 10 years. Her jaw tightened. We're trying to be proactive. Make sure things are in place before anything happens. I'm not dying. No one said that. You said everything but. She paused, then took a slow step forward. Look, Martin's been talking to a financial planner. If we consolidate some of the assets, the house, the insurance, the old stocks, we could set up something long-term, for all of us. For all of you, I corrected. Mom, that's not fair. You're right, I said. It's not. Gina lowered her voice. You're being difficult. No, Gina. I'm being clear. She looked at me, then really looked. And for the first time in years, I think she saw someone other than the old woman in the housecoat. She saw the person who had fed her, defended her, stood behind her through every disaster. The person who kept the lights on, the doors open, and her name out of the papers. I came here to help, she said, quieter now. No, you came here to close a deal. Her shoulders sank. She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, then looked up. Martin said maybe we pushed too hard, that maybe we should have handled it differently. I didn't answer. She looked around again, then back at me. You won't sign it, will you? No? And the lawyer? Mine's better. There was a long silence. Not hostile, not warm, just honest. I miss how we used to be, she said softly. So do I. Another pause. You're not angry? No, I said. I'm just not invisible anymore. She looked like she might cry, but didn't. Instead, she nodded, stepped back, and turned to go. At the door, she hesitated. Ava asked if she could come see you next weekend. I blinked. She doesn't need permission. Gina nodded once, then left. The door clicked shut. I stood there a while, listening to the house breathe. It was the same house, but something in it had changed. The stillness didn't feel like loneliness today. It felt like peace. The next morning, I sat in the sunroom with my coffee and the newspaper, though I hardly read the words. My mind kept circling back to one thing Gina said before she left. You've always said you didn't want to be a burden. Funny how words echo differently when you finally listen to them in silence. I had said that, hadn't I? Probably more than once. Not as a plea, but as a promise. I'd meant, I'll take care of myself. But they'd heard, you're off the hook. They'd held me to that ever since. Mid-morning, the phone rang. It was Martin. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. Hi, Mom, he said quickly, like he was bracing for something. Gina told me she stopped by. She did. And? And we talked. He sighed. Look, we didn't mean to come on so strong the other day. It just felt urgent. You know how these things are. Timing, legal windows, market stuff. Market stuff? Yeah, housing values in your area are... I cut in. Martin, let me ask you something. Okay. When was the last time you came here without needing something? He was quiet. Not Gina. Not Eva. You. He cleared his throat. It's been a while. But that doesn't mean what? That we don't care. I waited. Mom, don't do this. I'm not doing anything. I'm asking a question. There was a beat of silence, then another. I'm sorry, he said finally. I should have visited more. That's not an apology. That's an excuse. Another pause. Okay, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He shifted back into business. Listen, I spoke to Mr. Caro. We're not going to push the documents. It was premature. Let's just put it aside for now. I already did. What do you mean? I tore them up. A sharp exhale on the line. Well, he said after a moment. Okay. I spoke to Diane Lockwood. The family lawyer? My lawyer now. He didn't say anything. I'm setting up a living trust, I continued. In my name. I keep control. No transfers. No hands in my pockets. Martin let out a slow breath. Okay. And I'm rewriting my will. His voice changed then, slightly. To what? To reflect reality. There was a long pause. What does that mean? He asked. It means what it sounds like. Mom, come on, you can't be serious. Over a misunderstanding? It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was very clear. We were trying to help. No, I said. You were trying to manage me. Quietly, efficiently, like a loose end. That's not true. Then tell me the truth, Martin. Why now? Why the rush? He didn't answer. I'll tell you what I think, I continued. You saw your future and I was in the way. You thought, let's fix that before she gets inconvenient. I'm not angry, I interrupted, but I'm not naive either, and I won't be handled. He sighed again, tired now, maybe embarrassed. I need to go, he said. Of course, he hesitated. Mom? Yes? Are we okay? I looked out the window at the rose bush Gerald planted 30 years ago, still blooming. We will be, I said, eventually. We hung up. Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch with a notebook and pen. Not legal forms, just thoughts, small memories, things I didn't want to lose. Ava as a baby, with her whole hand wrapped around my finger. The time Martin cried after his first job rejection. Gina's terrible high school haircut, and how we laughed until we cried. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted to remember who I had been when they still knew how to love me without negotiation. That night, I couldn't fall asleep. Not because of nerves, not even sadness, just memory. It kept me company like a familiar ache. I lay in bed, eyes on the ceiling fan, and thought of every check I'd written in the last 20 years. Some of them were big. Tuition, down payments, credit card bailouts after unexpected emergencies. Others were quiet, almost invisible. Grocery money slipped into envelopes, last-minute travel expenses, gifts that were meant to be from the kids, even though I'd footed the bill. At the time, none of it had felt like sacrifice. It had felt like what mothers do. But now, in the dark, it felt like something else entirely. Not regret, not bitterness, just clarity. By morning, I made a list. I went into the secretary desk and pulled out every folder, every receipt, every bank statement I still had. I lined them up on the dining table, a quiet museum of a life spent smoothing the paths of others. There was the canceled check for Martin's real estate license, the online invoice for Gina's wellness retreat, the repeated transfers to cover the gap this month, the bills I paid when Ava had her wisdom teeth out and her mother said, "We'll pay you back soon," but never did. Page after page, ink faded, numbers cold. I added them all up. Not to send an invoice, not to confront anyone, just to face the truth. It totaled just over $312,000. $312,000. I stared at the number for a long time. A house, a second retirement, a safety net I never gave myself. I wasn't angry. I'd given willingly. But I'd also believed, somewhere deep down, that my giving would earn me something. Gratitude, loyalty, a seat at the table when decisions were made. Instead, I'd been offered a signature on my own disappearance. At noon, I made a call to Diane. She picked up right away. "Lorraine, I want to move forward," I said. "Living trust. Will. Everything we talked about. I'll have the drafts ready tomorrow. And I want to create something else. Oh, a separate account, a trust, but not for Martin or Gina. There was a pause. For Eva, I said. She's the only one who calls just to say hello. I'll include it in the paperwork. After we hung up, I sat for a long time with the calculator still blinking its total. I didn't cry. I didn't rip anything up. I simply picked up the papers and filed them again, this time under a new label, no longer owed. That afternoon, I got a message from Gina. Eva says she wants to stop by next weekend. Just checking that you're okay with that. I replied, of course. She's always welcome. No emoji, no small talk, just truth. By evening, I made lentil soup and cleaned the kitchen while it simmered. The house felt quiet again, but no longer hollow. There was space now, for breath, for decisions, for me. I thought of Gerald, how he used to say, don't wait for people to give you your worth, know it yourself. I'd waited too long for someone else to notice, but now that I had, I wasn't going to forget it again. The bank smelled the same as always. Printer paper, carpet cleaner, something faintly metallic. I arrived just before my appointment, and the woman at the front desk offered me water with a kind of reverence usually reserved for clients with serious assets. Mrs. Hemsley, she said, Ms. Lockwood is waiting for you upstairs. Diane stood as I entered, all business again, papers neatly arranged, 2 pens laid out, her glasses already slipping down her nose. You look well, she said, gesturing for me to sit. I feel steady, I answered. She nodded. Everything is ready. We'll go through it one section at a time. So we did. First, the living trust. My name, my home, my control, all formal, airtight. Then the will, clear, concise. I was leaving certain things to Eva. A savings bond Gerald had set aside, my wedding band, a few family photographs, the blue teapot from Ireland she always admired. The rest, unspecified, for now. And this, Diane said, turning to the final set of documents, is the trust account for Eva, funded from your reserves, fully separate from the estate. How much is in it? That's up to you. Right now, we've allocated $85,000. I looked at the page. Enough for a home down payment, graduate school, a safety net she hadn't asked for but had quietly earned. She doesn't know I'm doing this. She doesn't need to. You're not buying her love. No, I said. I'm rewarding her kindness. Diane slid the pen toward me. Whenever you're ready. I signed. Each stroke felt like a clean cut through fog. Not revenge, not defiance, just choice. When we finished, she collected the documents, clipped them, and stood. I'm proud of you, Lorraine. I'm not proud, I said. But I'm finally not ashamed. We smiled, both understanding what that meant. Outside, the air was cooler than I expected. Autumn had taken over fully now, gold and rust in every tree, the sidewalks littered with leaves that looked like paper secrets. I walked back to the car slowly. Each step felt like one away from the woman who always said yes, even when it hurt. Back home, I made tea and sat by the front window. The same place I'd waited all those years, expecting someone to knock without asking for something. That knock never came. And now it didn't need to. Around 5, the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. Then again. Martin. Then Gina. Then a text from Eva. Hi, Grandma. Just wanted to say I miss you. Can I stop by this weekend? I answered simply, yes, I'd love that. And that was all I needed that day. Not closure, not applause. Just a text that didn't come with attachments. I didn't feel angry. That surprised me most. Anger used to come quick in my younger years, when Gerald forgot something important, when the kids lied about homework or curfews, when the world refused to play fair. But now, I wasn't angry. I was just awake. The world hadn't shifted. I had. For the first time in decades, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing what to say, what not to say, what to allow, what to end. Friday came quietly. No calls that morning, no messages. Even the silence felt deliberate, like they were waiting for me to reach out first. I didn't. Instead, I cleaned out the back closet, pulled out old jackets, scarves no one wore, photo albums we never opened anymore. One box was labeled Christmas Living Room. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a bundle of old cards, some from Gerald, most from the kids. "Thanks for everything, Mom. Couldn't have done it without you." One said, "We'll pay you back next month, promise." I laughed, not bitterly. Just a small sound in a quiet room. I put the cards back and taped the box shut. By noon, I'd made soup and set 2 plates. Not because I expected anyone, just because I wanted to feel like a host again. Like someone who mattered in their own house. Then I walked outside. The sun had warmed the porch. The trees whispered, soft and crackling. I swept the leaves, cleared the gutters, checked the mailbox. No letters, just ads, and a charity envelope addressed to current resident. I smiled at that. Inside, the phone rang again. I let it go. A minute later, it rang once more, then a third time. I picked it up on the fourth. "Hello? Mom?" "Martin." I didn't say anything. "I know you're upset." "I'm not upset," I said. He waited, unsure. "I'm clear," I added. "Okay, fair enough." He sounded tired. I don't want things to fall apart." "Then stop pulling on the threads." "I didn't mean to." "But you did." He paused. "Can we come by this weekend?" "Who's we?" "Me, Gina, maybe Eva if she wants to." "Eva's already coming," I said. "Oh." Another pause. "Mom, you know we love you." I didn't reply. He continued, "We've just been busy." "That's not love, Martin. That's scheduling. Can it be both?" "Maybe once, not anymore." "I get it. I really do. But this trust stuff, Diane's calling it permanent." "It is. I just wish we could have talked first." "You came with a lawyer." "I know," he said. "I know." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list receipts. I didn't ask for apologies. I just said, "This house is mine. My decisions are mine. That doesn't mean you're cut off. It means I'm not erased." He didn't argue. "That's fair," he said softly. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." We ended the call without drama. I went back to the porch, brought in the cushions before the evening chill set in. I made tea, read half a chapter. The silence felt different now. Not emptiness, but space. Room for better things. Saturday morning arrived soft and overcast. The kind of gray that used to make me feel lonely. But not today. Today, I felt still. The good kind. The kind that settles in your bones when you've stopped waiting for someone else to tell you who you are. I baked blueberry scones, the way Ava liked them. Nothing fancy, just flour, butter, memory. The kitchen filled with that quiet smell of care, the one no candle or air freshener can fake. Around 10, I heard her car in the driveway. Old brakes, soft music playing. She always parked like she didn't want to bother the grass. I smiled before I even saw her. She knocked, even though she never had to. "Hi, Grandma." 23, but she still called me that like it meant something weighty and sweet. Her hair was tucked into a braid, freckles across her cheeks, hands full. A bag of oranges, a magazine, something homemade in a jar. I brought marmalade, she said, stepping inside. And gossip. We sat at the table, just like always. She asked how I'd been. I told her the truth. Not everything, but the shape of it. She didn't press, but her eyes read the spaces I left empty. We sipped tea, ate warm scones, laughed about things that didn't hurt. Then, somewhere between the second cup and the last crumb, she looked up and asked, "Is something going on?" I didn't flinch. With Mom and Uncle Martin, I mean. What makes you ask? They've been weird, whispering, snapping at each other. I heard Mom on the phone talking about documents and damage control. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. I exhaled. That's why I trusted her. Not because she was perfect, but because she waited without prying. I stood, fetched the trust paperwork from the drawer, and placed it on the table. She read it silently, not skimming, reading, absorbing. When she finished, she looked up. "Is this because of them?" "It's because of me." She nodded slowly. "I get it. I'm not cutting them out," I said. "But I'm drawing a line. Something they didn't think I'd ever do. They're not happy. I'm not here to make them happy." She gave me a long look, then smiled. Just a little. "I'm proud of you." I swallowed something heavy. "There's a trust for you, too," I added. Separate. Quiet. It's not a reward. It's just acknowledgement. She didn't cry. She didn't thank me like it was a favor. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I don't need anything, Grandma. I just want you to be okay." I believed her. Later, we walked through the garden. She pointed out things that needed fixing, offered to come back next week with tools. She asked if I wanted to try planting herbs next spring. I said yes. When she left, she hugged me longer than usual. After the door closed, I stood still in the hallway, listening to the silence. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. They showed up again Sunday afternoon, together this time. No lawyer, no folder. Just Martin and Gina standing side by side on my porch, like two people who had finally realized knocking was the only way in. I opened the door but didn't move aside. "We'd like to talk," Martin said. "I imagine you would," I replied. Gina forced a small smile. "We're not here to argue." "Good," I said, "because I'm not hosting a fight." I let them in. No tea this time, no polite offers. I sat and they stood, shifting like kids caught in something they thought they'd get away with. Martin went first. "Mom, we've been thinking about everything, about how we handled things." Gina picked up. "It wasn't right. Bringing the lawyer like that, not explaining. We were trying to be efficient, and we forgot to be human." I nodded, once. "That's true." He looked at the floor. "We thought we were helping, but we made you feel cornered." "You didn't make me feel cornered," I said. "You cornered me. There's a difference." Neither of them argued. "I just don't understand," Martin said finally, his voice lower now. "You've always helped us, always stepped in. We assumed—" He trailed off. "You assumed I'd keep doing it forever," I finished. Gina looked up. "It wasn't about entitlement?" "No?" I asked. "Then why did you both look so surprised when I said no?" They didn't answer. Martin sighed. "The truth is, without your help, we're stuck." There it was, not dressed up, not softened, stuck. "And whose fault is that?" I asked calmly. "We're not blaming you. You don't have to. You're here asking again." They looked at each other. "We just didn't expect things to go this far," Gina said. "No," I said. "You didn't expect me to change." Silence settled in the room, like dust. Finally, Martin sat down. Gina followed. "We're not good at this," he said. "At what?" "At being children to someone who still has boundaries." I almost smiled at that. Almost. Gina shifted. "We didn't come to manipulate you, I swear. But we're in a bad place. Financially. If the house had gone into the trust, it would have solved a lot of problems. And if I had quietly disappeared, you wouldn't have had to face what kind of people you were being." That one landed. I saw it in the way Gina blinked fast, the way Martin's jaw clenched. "I didn't raise either of you to be selfish," I said. "But somewhere along the way, you decided to treat me like a resource, not a person." Martin's voice was rough. "We messed up." "Yes. And now you're here hoping I'll fix it." "We're here," Gina said carefully, "because you matter to us." I studied them. "You matter to me, too," I said. "But I've had to accept that loving you doesn't mean letting you undo me." Martin leaned forward. "Then what do we do now?" I thought about that for a moment. "You grow up," I said, "fully, without leaning on me to carry the weight of your mistakes. And if we do, then maybe, over time, we talk again. Not as dependents and rescuer, but as people." Gina exhaled shakily. "I don't know if we can fix all of this." "Neither do I. But we won't fix anything if you keep hoping I'll just go back to how I was." Martin nodded. "I don't expect your help anymore," he said. "Good," I said, "because it won't come." Gina reached into her purse. I tensed, expecting papers. But she pulled out a small photograph. Me and Gerald. Young, sunlit, smiling at some forgotten picnic. "I found this in a drawer," she said. "Thought you might want it." I took it. For the first time that day, I softened. "Thank you," I said. They stood, awkward again, unsure. As they moved toward the door, I added, "You can visit again, if it's just a visit." Martin nodded. "No talk of assets," I said. "No favors, no guilt." "Understood." Gina looked back one last time. "We'll do better." I didn't say anything, just closed the door behind them and stood in the hallway, holding that photo. The light in it, in our faces, in the grass, in the sky, it looked like something worth protecting. And now, finally, I was. They still thought they could shame me. Not with cruelty. No. That would have been too obvious, too messy. Instead, they used the quieter weapons. Disappointment, pity, carefully chosen words meant to sound like concern, but cut like dismissal. "You don't really need all this space, Mom. Wouldn't it be easier to have someone else handle the decisions? Don't you think it's time to let go of the stress?" Let go. As if my life, my history, my home, my name on the deed was just clutter in their inheritance plan. As if my stubbornness was the only thing standing between them and what they felt they deserved. And maybe it was. But I was done pretending that made me the unreasonable one. After they left, I stood at the window and watched their car disappear down the street. Then I sat with the photograph Gina had brought, the one of me and Gerald, taken back when the world still felt full of beginnings. We were both smiling in that picture. Real smiles. Not the polite ones you put on when you feel like a guest in your own family. I ran my thumb over the image and said aloud, "They still don't see me, Jerry. But I see myself now." Finally. That night, I made myself a proper dinner. Roasted vegetables, a bit of chicken, and a slice of apple pie I'd frozen last fall. I set the table for one, but I used the nice plate. The real napkin. No television, no distractions. Just me. Midway through the meal, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Mrs. Hemsley. Yes? This is Carla Price from the financial office at Fairview Hospital. I'm calling to confirm some updates to your emergency contact records. I'm sorry? We received a request this morning to update your file. Removing Martin Hemsley and Gina Murray as your primary contacts and replacing them with Eva Murray? I smiled, slowly. Yes, I said. That's correct. Great. We just need verbal confirmation for the change. I confirm it. Thank you, ma'am. That's all we needed. After we hung up, I stared at the wall for a long moment. They'd tried to make decisions for me. Now I'd made one for myself. The next morning, Gina called. Hi, Mom, she said, a little too lightly. Morning. I just got a notification from the hospital. Something about emergency contact changes? Yes. Why? I didn't feel comfortable listing people who might not pick up the phone. That's not fair, she said, voice tight. It's honest, I replied. You've made it clear your time is limited. I'd rather rely on someone who actually shows up. Eva's a child. She's a grown woman, and she's kind. Gina didn't respond for a moment. This feels spiteful. No. Spite is when you hurt someone to feel powerful. This is protection. I see. I doubt that. Martin said you're rewriting the will. I am. Mom, don't do anything you'll regret. I already did, I said. I waited too long to protect myself. She went silent. Then, quieter, she asked, Does this mean we're out? I paused. That's up to you, I said, but I won't be written over again. Okay, she whispered. I guess we'll talk later. Maybe. I hung up. Then I made tea, sat by the garden window. Listened to the sparrows chirping in the hedges. The world was quieter now, not because it had changed, but because I wasn't drowning in everyone else's noise. Later that afternoon, Eva texted me a photo of a bakery she'd found near her clinic. They have lemon poppy seed muffins just like yours. Want me to bring you some next time? I answered. Only if you promise to eat one with me. I called Diane on Tuesday morning. I'm ready, I said. She didn't ask for clarification. She knew. We'd gone through the paperwork twice already, made notes, marked options. But now the tone of my voice told her I wasn't just preparing anymore. I was acting. We met at her office after lunch. The sky was pale and cold, the kind of November blue that always made me feel like I should hurry, even when there was nothing urgent. But I walked slowly, deliberately. Every step felt earned. Diane had everything ready. First, she said, we'll finalize the trust. Everything remains in your name, and you retain full authority until the day you decide otherwise, if ever. Good. Second, your will. We've removed Martin and Gina from the primary inheritance. I nodded. Eva receives the house, the trust account, your remaining savings, the contents of your safe deposit box, all personal belongings. Everything else is to be donated as listed. And there's no way for them to challenge that? Not successfully. You're competent, documented, and protected by legal counsel. I took a breath. Add one more thing, I said. Diane raised an eyebrow. A letter, I said. Not a legal one. A personal one, to be attached to the will. I want them to read something from me when I'm gone. Not to explain, just to be clear. She slid over a blank page. Write it here. I'll make sure it's included. So I did. I wrote in my own hand. Slow, careful, without second guessing. I didn't call them ungrateful. I didn't accuse. I didn't shame. I simply said, this was my life. I carried it alone longer than I should have, and now I leave it behind with peace, because I finally remembered that my worth was not measured by your approval. I signed it, folded it, handed it to Diane. She read it silently, then tucked it into the folder. "You're done," she said gently. I nodded. We stood. "I was scared of this," I said. "Of what?" "Of choosing myself." "You're not the first," she replied, "but you're one of the few who actually does." We said goodbye. I stepped out into the wind. It had picked up, and the trees were half naked now, their leaves scattered like the remains of decisions made too late. But I wasn't late. Not this time. When I got home, I made soup, folded laundry, lit a candle in the living room. The house smelled like rosemary and something clean, like a reset. Midway through the evening, my phone buzzed. A message from Martin. "Heard from someone that you've been rewriting things. If that's true, I hope you've thought it through. Families shouldn't fall apart over paperwork." I didn't respond. Then another message, this time from Gina. "I don't know what Ava's been saying to you, but you're being unfair. We're still your children." Still. As if biology was the only credential that mattered. I turned the phone face down and picked up my knitting. I hadn't touched it in weeks. The pattern was simple, something I'd started for no one in particular. A scarf, maybe, or a blanket edge. But it felt good to do something with my hands again. By the time I finished 3 rows, my shoulders had relaxed. The house creaked gently around me, not from age, but from breath. This was what peace looked like. Not absence. Presence on my own terms. The first frost came overnight. I woke to a pale glaze on the windows, and that particular quiet the world holds when it's been hushed by cold. The garden looked like it had exhaled in the dark and frozen mid-breath. My breath fogged the glass as I stood at the window, hands wrapped around a warm mug. November always made the house feel bigger, colder, quieter. But this year, it didn't feel lonely. Eva was due to visit that afternoon. She hadn't asked for anything, hadn't hinted or hovered. Just a short message 2 days before. "I'd like to come by, if that's okay. Just to sit." That was all. Just to sit. I cleaned the house that morning, not because I had to, but because I wanted her to arrive to warmth. I baked the last of the apples into a crumble and laid out 2 thick blankets on the couch. She arrived just after 2, cheeks pink from the cold, boots slightly damp. "Still smells like your house," she said, pulling off her coat. "Meaning?" "Meaning safe, and old books." We sat. We didn't rush to fill the silence. That was the thing I'd always admired in her. Eva never ran from stillness. She respected it. She pulled something from her bag. "Can I show you something?" I nodded. It was a notebook, spiral-bound, full of tabs and dog-eared corners. Inside, clinic notes, observations, scribbles from what looked like a long semester of listening and watching. "I've been working with a patient, older woman, sharp as anything, but her family keeps trying to tuck her into decisions she hasn't made yet." She looked up at me. "Sound familiar?" I smiled. "She reminds me of you," Eva said. "Stubborn, smart, tired of being managed. She sounds like she'll be fine." "She will. But it made me think, there are so many women like you, like her. Quiet for too long." I didn't reply, just listened. So I started writing about it, not as a paper, as a project. Something longer. Something that might turn into, I don't know, a book? A guide? "A record," I said. "Yes," she whispered. "Exactly." We sat in silence for a while longer. Then she looked at me and said, "Would you ever want to tell your story?" I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't know, but because I finally understood that what I had lived through wasn't just personal. It was shared, even if most never said it aloud. "I think I already am," I said. She smiled. We ate apple crumble in the living room, wrapped in blankets. She asked about Gerald, about how we met, about what scared me when I was her age. I told her stories I hadn't told in years, not because they were secrets, but because no one had asked. She stayed until the sun dipped low and the sky turned the color of ash. Before she left, she stood in the doorway and said, "You're not just surviving this, you're shaping it." "I'm trying," I said. "You are." After she drove off, I sat alone for a while, the way I often did. But it felt different now. The silence wasn't a punishment. It was mine. Later that evening, I checked my voicemail. One new message. Martin, again. "Mom, I heard you made Ava your main beneficiary. I guess I understand. Still hurts, but I get it. Maybe we'll talk one day." He didn't sound angry, just small. I deleted the message, not out of cruelty, out of mercy. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is leave the silence where it belongs. The week after Eva's visit passed in a kind of steady quiet. The kind that doesn't ache. The kind that just is. The air stayed cold. I wore thicker socks around the house, kept the kettle warm most of the day. Each room had its own kind of silence. The kitchen hummed with heat and memory. The hallway whispered with old photographs. The bedroom stayed still, like it had learned how to hold its breath. I didn't expect anything more from Martin or Gina, and nothing came. No messages, no knocks, no middle-of-the-night explanations. But I could feel them hovering, not physically, emotionally, in the way people linger around the consequences they caused but aren't ready to claim. I imagined them sitting at their kitchen tables, circling the idea that I'd finally stepped outside the script they wrote for me, and staying there. On Thursday, I received a letter in the mail, not typed, handwritten, neat. Gina's handwriting. The envelope was pale pink, like the ones she used to make thank you cards with when she was little. I stood at the counter for a moment before opening it. Inside, 2 pages. No apology, no plea, just a slow, uneven attempt at truth. She wrote, "I thought I was helping, but I see now I was managing. I didn't understand how much I'd started treating you like a problem to solve instead of a person to respect. That's on me. I can't undo it, but I can name it, and I can stop it." I sat down. She continued. "Eva's been different since she was little. She listened. She noticed. I didn't. I think that's what hurts most. Realizing that while I was looking at your hands, she was seeing your heart." By the end of the second page, she had written, "I won't ask for anything, not money, not property, not place. But if you ever want to talk again, just as mother and daughter, no roles, no leverage, I'd be grateful." She signed it simply, Gina. I folded the letter slowly. Then I tucked it in the drawer next to Gerald's old receipts and the faded picture of the garden he once planned to replant, but never did. I didn't cry. I didn't soften. But I felt something release, like a knot that had been pulled for so long it had forgotten it could loosen. That evening, I walked through the house, turning off the lights. Each room gave off a little warmth as I passed, like it knew its place again. I paused by the door to the guest room, the one Ava sometimes used when she stayed over. I opened the door. The bed was made. The small lamp still had its knitted cover. There was a book on the nightstand, one she'd left behind accidentally or maybe on purpose. I sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to hope. Not for a reunion, not for an apology, but for a future that didn't require me to disappear in order to be loved. Later, I stood by the window and looked out at the darkened street. I could see the outline of the rose bush Gerald had planted. It was bare now, but it wasn't dead. It would bloom again in its own time. So would I. The morning of my 66th birthday came with no fanfare, no balloons, no breakfast trays, no surprise calls. Just light, soft and honest, through the curtains and the quiet thrum of the heater doing its best against the November chill. I made myself oatmeal, added cinnamon, sat at the kitchen table with the paper, but didn't read it. I just listened to the sounds of my own home. Nothing dramatic, nothing broken, just life, as it was. A little after 10, Eva arrived. No candles, no songs, just a simple, gentle knock. She held a bouquet of small wildflowers, the kind you find by accident, not the ones from the supermarket cooler. I didn't know what to bring, she said, so I just brought something that felt like you. We didn't mention the date. We didn't pretend it needed celebration. We sat on the porch, bundled in sweaters, sharing warm bread and jam, watching the sky go pale, then gold. At one point, she looked at me and said, "You don't owe anyone softness you had to cut from yourself." I don't know where she learned to say things like that. Maybe she learned it here. After she left, I walked through each room like I always do. But this time, I didn't look for what was broken or missing. I looked for what had stayed. The chair with the slightly crooked leg that never buckled. The crack in the kitchen tile that never grew. The small things that had been tested, but held. In the living room, I paused at the framed photo of me and Gerald. I touched the glass lightly. "I'm okay now," I said out loud. "Took me a while, but I got here." There was no answer, of course, but I didn't need one. Later that evening, I opened the drawer where I'd tucked Gina's letter. I didn't reread it. I didn't need to. But I took a blank card from the same drawer and wrote just one line. "I see the knot is loosening. So is mine." I addressed it. I didn't seal it. Some things don't need to be sent right away. Some truths are patient. As the sky went dark, I made myself tea and sat by the window. Outside, a few early stars blinked into view, careless and bright. I watched them like I used to when the house was full and the noise never stopped. But I didn't miss that chaos now, because I had something better. Space, choice, stillness, and the quiet, quiet power of being a woman who finally chose herself. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening, for sitting with me through the quiet. And if this story reminded you of someone you know or someone you've been, don't let it stay just a story. Share it. Leave a comment. Tag someone who needs it. Sometimes the most radical thing we can do is speak the truth out loud and know it was always ours to tell.